Hi, Barry Eaton here, and welcome to Radio Out There. And my guest, Duncan Rhodes, publisher and editor of Nexus. Duncan, great to see you again, and you're looking well.
Hi, Barry. Thank you very much. You're looking good too.
Well, there we are. A little bit of nice exchange there. Now, look, we have, as we've talked before, we have Pluto making a massive change in just a few weeks' time, leaving Capricorn, all that control and authoritarianism, and moving into a whole different area. But we've talked about AI before, but AI now is on the verge of, well, I guess exploding. And there's a very big story in the current edition of Nexus about the great AI deception. Yeah.
Yes. Well, if you've been reading Nexus, oh, by the way, we are discussing Nexus, that issue.
That's the one.
Volume 31, number 6. Okay, so we have in Nexus over the years built up a general perception that AI is very smart, progressing fast, has incredible capabilities, may become self-aware, and may, take over the universe and enslave all humans. And, this has been aided and abetted by news releases from corporations, fancy adverts, movies, and up until about a year ago, you would be very forgiven for believing that AI posed a threat to most jobs, a threat to your privacy, blah, 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 et cetera, Well, in the last 6 to 8 months, 9 months, more and more AI and technology researchers, podcasters and bloggers have been saying that AI is real, but 90% of what the public believe is over-generated hype designed to cause massive investment in the AI sector. So we've watched on TV over the past few years examples of, like Amazon. You go into their Amazon store and you basically, scan in on the way into the store, so the store knows who you are and everything about you, and you just pick up items that you want and walk out the other door. You don't even scan them, etc. And it was promoting the idea that, Amazon's AI is now able to do this, etc., etc. But, and there's been a host of other examples of the very biggest tech companies alluding to breakthroughs, etc., that they just don't have. And even just the other day with Tesla's robot AI wandering around, there was a big thing in the media about Tesla's AI robot. And it came out today that they did some very selective editing and pre-arrangement to make the robot look as autonomous as it does. So I'm talking the biggest companies, Amazon, Tesla, Google, Apple, Meta, who owns Facebook and Instagram, are all absolutely guilty of overhyping their AI abilities and capabilities for the purposes of getting investment. And it worked. They raked in billions and billions and billions of investor dollars into the AI sector. And I don't think the investors are going to get anywhere near the return on their bang for the buck as they would like. It could turn into an ugly tech bubble, or it could go down roads which are quite dystopian and not very pleasant. Generally speaking, the threat of losing your job is still real, but it's not so immediate. And
but that's only in some areas, surely, because...
Well, in some areas, yes. And, robotics and AI need to be separated, although a lot of robots in the future will have a type of AI controlling them. So, yes, there is definitely already a shedding of factory floor workers in terms of people selecting and packing items to be shipped out from a big warehouse. A lot of humans have been replaced by AI and robots. But you wouldn't even call them robots in a traditional sense. They are like automated retrieval, locating and packing systems. And in China, they got some, incredible ones where there's only one human on the floor. and some of
Duncan,
them are
I
quite
saw that in
spectacular.
Japan when I was there
Yeah.
in the 1980s. I was taken on a tour with a lot of other journalists, and we went through
Mm.
all the Panasonic factories. And that was the case it was back, and that was nearly 40 years ago. So, I
Yeah.
mean, it's nothing new about that.
Exactly. I mean, the areas which I would consider are probably most at risk would be legal and financial firms, because an AI program is very capable of being trained on all the minutiae laws and
Mm,
regulations which are fixed. And AI loves to work on, data, etc. And if you've got fixed data, which are laws and regulations with bylaws, and you've got precedents that have been made in different courts, and you've got the legal system of three levels of government, you've got international law. Once AI is told all this, it can outdo a human, but you will still need a human to oversee the output of the AI for a
mm,
period of time to make sure that the AI isn't what they call hallucinating. And so people out there are definitely using some of the public interface AIs like ChatGPT, and
mm.
it's got some very practical functions. As a magazine publisher and editor, I now am aware that people out there are using ChatGPT to write an article in 10 seconds.
Of course.
And
And write a script as well.
it's very believable, and it can be on any topic, especially fringe topics like Nexus, and it can, make a very. It's just that there's a type of feel about AI articles. They don't feel very personal. You don't feel a human presence in them. They feel literally bland information things. There's
Mm.
nothing wrong with it. It's just lacking personality. So I've started to ask a couple of researchers and writers who've sent in unsolicited stuff, did you use AI on this? And I'm getting to the stage where I'm probably going to find the website that you go to where you cut and paste a whole lot of text and say, did AI make this, or was this coming out of a human brain? And, the irony there is you're using AI to detect what AI has written as opposed to what the humans have written.
Yeah.
So, but the article here is basically, it's not poo-pooing AI, it's poo-pooing the perceptions of what humans have in terms of where it's at and how immediate the threat is. And don't get me wrong, the people at the top are forever going to try and remove as many people in middle and bottom layers as possible
Mm.
and hand it over to controllable AI and robots. My biggest concern would be for military applications. And if anyone watching and following the war, the fighting between Russia and Ukraine, you'll see that drones and AI drones are now, that's where the future of war is. Yes, sending missiles long distances that can't be shot down at hypersonic things. But in terms of the battlefield, tanks and infantry are being replaced by drones.
Mm.
And a soldier will be, 5 kilometres away in a hidden location with first-person view goggles on, and he'll be flying a drone with a bomb. And, they're scouting around looking for vehicles, locations, and they're getting more advanced. The Russian ones are now sort of handing over and talking to each other. So one drone will do its thing, and before it explodes on a target, it'll hand over the surveillance and monitoring of that area to the next drone.
Mm.
And yeah, it's
right.
drones may very well replace police in the future.
Indeed. Now, I watched for the first time recently the old film of 1984, which starred Richard Burton. And this whole area of this devastated countryside because of constant warfare and all done by mechanics is so real. 1984, 40 years ago, the setting. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was watching a clip of Arthur C. Clarke, the famous science fiction writer, and in the 1950s, maybe it was in the 60s, he was basically doing a piece to camera discussing the future of technology. It must have been the 50s because humans had not long had the transistor. We'd gone from vacuum tubes to transistors, which is a huge jump. And there's a big conspiracy theory about the jump to using transistors. Some people argue we stole it from Nazi scientists. Others say no, it was given to us from friendly aliens who were encouraging mankind to upgrade its science. And that is...
I like that one. I like that one, yeah.
Well, I mean, to be honest, the Nazis were very advanced, but a lot of Nazi rocket scientists say they got it from aliens. And, I mean, this is a crazy thing. Off on a tangent here. You've got the two top Nazi rocket scientists, Oberth and von Braun. You've got... And I mean, the one is the top German rocket scientist of all time. The next is the top American rocket scientist of all time, who was stolen from the Nazis. That's Werner von Braun. He's like the brains of NASA, and all of NASA's rocket science came from him. So Oberth, von Braun, and then you've got the Israeli father of their space program and missiles and space stuff, Haim Eshed, who about 4 years ago, and he's getting on now, but he's like the godfather, another equivalent to Oberth and von Neumann. He said we wouldn't have been out in space if it wasn't for the help from the aliens. So you've got the world's three top rocket scientists all openly making statements saying how we wouldn't have got where we did without the help from our friendly visitors. Yeah, Germans, Americans and Israelis all saying it. That's just off on the tangent. So
going back to our article, there's a wonderful point they make while we're talking about military, about how military intelligence through AI is so far developed, we are way behind. And they are releasing stuff like AI only in the wake of all of their development, shall we say. I found that point very interesting.
Well, I think that point is not only interesting, I was very surprised the author found it and put it in the article because it's not widely known. A few months ago, I had a chat to a guy from high up in the Australian Defence Force and on military intelligence. He didn't give away lots of details. And we obliquely discussed some of the problems going on with China, etc. And he confirmed, yes, military intelligence technically has been at war with China's intelligence for 10, 15, maybe 20 years, depending on how far you want to go back. Yeah. But the takeaway that I got from the conversation was how depressed and despondent he was. He said inside the military intelligence and most intelligence and a lot of top military decision-making processes in Australia, he said AI dictates it. He said AI is always responding to things going on overseas and then spewing out our response to it. He said it doesn't appear to be human decisions except to pull out the piece of paper and say, okay, well, we need to deploy this intelligence unit to Malaysia to monitor how many shipping containers are going through this passage. And that's what the AI has told them to do. Now, bear in mind, Australia is not a sovereign nation, as much as everybody watching this would like it to be and maybe has thought. And we've never been a sovereign nation. We've always been a military and resource outpost of the UK, USA, NATO empire. I mean, before you could have just called it the UK, USA empire because the UK, USA empire controls NATO. So New Zealand, Canada, Australia, Britain, we're part of the Five Eyes network, and we occupy a very strategically important position down the Southern Hemisphere in Australia and New Zealand, in particular because of its access to the Antarctic, which the UK, USA empire has really got tentacles into. So Australia, we have no sovereignty. We're part of the empire, so it is quite consistently logical that when decisions are made, they're made at the Nexus, the command centre, which is overseas, and we basically are told at a command and decision-making level in our military and intelligence, those decisions are made by AI and then dictated to us. So there's no boffins sitting around in Australia, in Canberra, making intelligence decisions but on the basis for Australia's sovereignty, taking into account what the French are doing, what the Americans are doing and what the British are doing. We do what we are told from top to bottom in military and intelligence. And
we're an outpost.
We are a puppet country, and it's shown in how much rent we used to pay for Pine Gap and all the facilities in North West Cape. It used to be like a peppercorn per year in rent. I mean, it was a joke, and the joke was how much the Australian leadership of the time rolled over and said, here, scratch my belly, throw me a bone, we'll do anything for you, just put me in charge. And it's been like that. And, the idea that we've had a political party system, left versus right, which has been at each other is just been a charade. And thankfully, these days, most people are seeing through the charade. They're seeing that Liberal and Labor are a uni party, same in New Zealand and Canada and England, and people are going, they're a uni party. They vote on everything, plagues, pandemics, wars, Brexits. They're all the same. There may as well not be any separation. And and that's pretty much been the case for much longer than people have realised. But Pluto coming out, the unseen is becoming visible, much to the annoyance and chagrin of the people at the top. And they're just happily starting wars and crises and problems to try and distract people from it. Now, I would like to segue in on to another story in here, which I'll only touch on briefly, because you talked about the drones in 1984 and the future. And in this article of Nexus, we've got a bit of a write-up about an American Christian pastor or visionary, if you like, a guy called Brandon Biggs.
Amazing.
I mentioned him in the editorial. I might have mentioned him briefly last time we were on air. But I did a one-page write-up basically because several people wanted to know where they could watch it for themselves. And, I'm, as you can appreciate doing Nexus, I get people sending me predictions and prophecies. A lot of it probably comes from light workers and psychics and stuff like that. Not a lot of Christian stuff comes my way because not a lot of Christians have really got the confidence in their connection to God to put prophecies out there so blatantly. But this one guy, Brandon Biggs, he had a very clear vision. And the one that caught my attention was him seeing an assassination attempt on President Trump during the campaign, in public, and literally what he saw was exactly what we all saw on the TV cameras on the one that...
And this happened a long time before that.
Yeah, he saw this months and months and months before Trump got nicked on the ear, and it's propelled Brandon to a lot more, people have put a lot more attention on him. And I've got to say, he has stayed humble and credit, and he said, this is what God shows me. He says, I don't understand half of what God shows me, and God tells me things using words and places I've never heard of, so I'm running to encyclopedias and things like that. So what's interesting is in Brandon's original vision of the long-term future. Now, Brandon, being an American Christian, has got some American Christian ideas. They all think Israel is wonderful, Russia is evil, and that there's going to be a rapture, and Satan's trying to stop everything. So their interpretation of the Bible is a bit different from Christians in the rest of the world. But, that's an American situation. And, of course, in his Christian perspective, the rapture and the tribulations are a given. So the vision he is shown by Jesus of the future, he was shown it in 2014. He didn't upload it and make a YouTube video of it until 2021, and then he didn't really tell people about the video for another couple of years because he was sort of a bit, I wouldn't say ashamed or embarrassed, but I think he was a bit afraid of ridicule. But God kept telling him, put it up, make the video, and put it up, make the video, and put it up, and then he did. And so it's got a bit of attention. And I might have mentioned to you, the vision starts off with a bit of a bang. He's taken into the future in the town where he lives, and you can see there's been a few changes of shops, and there are people running around. There's a hint of smoke in the background. People are screaming, and in this vision in the future, he can see, it's one of those visions, a bit like an out-of-body experience where you can smell things, everything's in colour, you can hear, it feels like you're there. He said, I felt like I was physically there. I could feel the wind brushing my hair and hints of heat, people running around, I could smell things. And he stopped one young lady who was running by in a panic, and he said, young lady, what's going on? Can you tell me what's happened? And she's like, don't you know? Didn't you see? The aliens, they came and took all the people, they've took all the Christians, they've took all the children. And in Brandon's mind, he's immediately assuming, this woman's talking about the rapture.
The rapture, yeah.
And they've all been lifted up by God, but she's thinking it's aliens. So, she obviously isn't a Christian. And that's in his mind. Now, the Jesus fellow in this vision was standing right next to him, but none of the people running around could see Jesus. They could only see him, which he thought was interesting. And but Jesus didn't say, that's not a rapture, that's aliens. He just let Brandon see the vision and interpret it in his own.
For
So
himself,
I'd
yeah.
look at that and I'd say, aliens, this is really interesting. So I watched more of a vision to get a context about how these aliens are. And being a Christian, most American Christians of Brandon's ilk all deny aliens and UFOs, and they put them down to demons and the work of Satan. Some Christians are a bit more savvy and say, yeah, they're about aliens, which, they might as well be demons in that sort of sense of goodies and baddies, but it's a bit of a progression. But what I did learn from Brandon's vision of the future was two things. I'm getting back to the drones, is that in the future, before the rapture and the tribulation event where people have disappeared, and that includes, he said, it seemed to be all children up to around the age of 14 and 15 had disappeared as well. But he said people were still having babies at that point, and the babies that were born didn't disappear. They were, born into the period of the tribulation, as he talks about it. And so he said before the time of the tribulation, in terms of a time frame, he said aliens will be discussed and UFOs will be discussed in mainstream media almost every day. It will have become normalized. He didn't say the context in which the media would discuss aliens, friendly, neutral, or hostile. He just said they'd be talking about them. So it wasn't a surprise that, people disappeared and people put it down to aliens, etc., etc. Now, the other part of the vision of the future was sometime after this rapture tribulation where people disappeared, a lot of humans in America realised, holy crikey, the Bible is right. We need to get right with God, even though Brandon's saying it's too late. And he talks about the megachurch Christians who were, they didn't disappear, and most of their congregation didn't disappear. And he talks about how angry the Christians who weren't raptured are at the pastors who misled them. And basically Brandon is saying, if you're a Christian who believes and feels God, the God of love, etc., that's where you are. If you are a person who wants to do all your physical things and just go to church in the hopes that, you're putting in your, you're going to pay 20 cents a week or $2 a week to get to God, that ain't going to work. You got to have God in your heart, not in your, which I get, and I sort of felt fair cop. But anyway, the other part of the future, which was a bit chilling, was that they created the 30-minute cities with barricades around them, and the leader of the world appeared on TV, and all the world leaders basically said, "Yes, you're our world leader," and then there was mass worship of the world leader on big billboards and TV screens put around all the sanctuary cities. And then people got the chip, the computer chip, the Neuralink, and it was basically either done at the forehead or on the back of the hand, just like in the Bible, obviously. And as soon as you got the chip, you were sort of like turned into a bit of a zombie. And of course, a lot of people didn't want the chip, and they fled to the country, and they were living in caves. And the thing is, what was sent out to hunt them down was swarms of drones. Mm-hmm. These drones were, you could hear them, and he was talking about the smells of things, and he said these people trying to escape the New World Order. He said they didn't send out military troops. They did in some places, but he said they would send out drone swarms who would basically fly. You'd hear them coming and you'd dive for cover, and the drones would patrol areas, and any noise the drones would pick up on, any heat signature. They were filled with technology to listen and to see infrared heat signatures. And as soon as the drone saw or heard anything suspicious, a signal was sent to the nearest office of the SWAT team, and a big black vehicle would come out with bulletproof plates on it, and guys would jump out wearing all black. And he said the weapons that they had to shoot at escaping humans, he says, was nothing I've ever seen before. He said it put out like a sound beam. And he said all they did was pull the trigger and sprayed the beam in like 180 degrees, and every human in its range would just fall down asleep. And then they'd be woken up, offered to take the mark of the beast. They didn't take the mark of the beast. They had their heads cut off instantly. And as soon as they took the mark of the beast, they were sort of like zombified. And he talked about one family that were caught, and the father said, "Okay, I'll take the chip. Just let my family go." They chipped him. The wife and kids basically said, "No, we're not going to do it," and they cut off the heads of the wife and the kids. And the husband who'd been chipped just stood there emotionless. So it was quite a dystopian future. It was
Very
portrayed.
Orwellian.
Yeah, very Orwellian. And I mean, it's sort of, I mean, if you were an evil, villain, it's probably what you would, logically do. And that's, what they're planning now. He's not saying that this is definitely going to happen and come true. He says, God says you can pray over a lot of this and mitigate the severity and the rest of it. But I thought it's interesting, he sees God being, he sees Trump's ear being nicked, and he's got some very interesting and detailed perspectives of the future. So anyway, we've covered that in this issue. And
you have, and also, before we leave it, he's need to come up with some forecasts for the post-Trump election.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They're very interesting, including economic collapse, all sorts of things.
He sees a beginning of a massive economic collapse in early 2025 is where he puts it. He sees the beginning of World War III as a result of something that Ukraine does to or in Belarus. And this guy had never heard of Belarus before. I mean, Americans, So he had to look it up, and he looked up Ukraine and saw the word Belarus and said, that's the place God was telling me about. And so he said, what happens is something, Ukraine crosses the line, something to do with Belarus or inside Belarus. Maybe Ukraine attacks Belarus. And whatever it happens, it's like Russia's last line has been crossed, and Russia responds with a weapon, an explosion in somewhere in Eastern Europe. He gives the exact detail in his vision. And he said there's this massive explosion and a type of mushroom cloud. And Brandon in the vision is going, oh, my dear, they're using nuclear weapons. And God says, no, Brandon, that's not a nuclear weapon. The Russians are using a new type of technology, which we know they've got. We know the Chinese have got it, the Americans have got it, the Brits have got it, and they've got defensive weapons they've never, which would make the realm of science fiction. That's how advanced they are.
Yeah, it's a neutron bomb.
Yeah, it's a type of neutron bomb because from what Brandon is told, it leaves the building standing but vaporizes every living thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it sends a shockwave through the world. And Brandon also says very specifically Turkey will join with the Russian side, Iran will join with the Russian side. It's interesting. There's a lot of whistleblowers and prophecies and predictions floating around at the moment, and there's a lot of crossover similarity to them all. There's a geopolitical whistleblower who's come forward after being read into documents a decade or more ago, and he says very, very similar. He says there's two things to look for around the beginning of World War III, and we haven't hit World War III yet, even though we're very close. I don't know what defines World War III, but we haven't hit it yet. But he said there's two things going to happen just around the beginning of World War III. Number one, scientists will announce that they have discovered an Earth-like planet with evidence of a civilization on it. And that happened only 2 or 3 months ago. We put it on Nexus newsfeed. It was all over the news. The James Webb Space Telescope found some planet. It's been named. The star's been named. But anyway, this fulfilled one of the two things. That would be, and this is planned. This isn't like the guy's psychic. They've written this down over 10 or 15 years ago, what's going to happen and what sequence. Because it seems to be important in the world plan to make humans aware of this planet that could have aliens living on it that have got cities and spaceships. So that seed's been planted, and that event has occurred. And he said, number two, he said the Taliban will be recognised as the official leaders and rulers of Afghanistan, and they will side with the West. The United Nations will basically say Taliban's on our side. They will work with the Americans. And when I read that a few months ago, I thought, I thought, this guy's interesting, but there's no way the Taliban are going to side with the West.
No
and then
way.
Guess what? It is heading that way.
Really?
I found a news item coming out of Asia in English, and it's talking about how annoyed Russia, China, and India are with the Taliban. The Taliban are not keeping any deals. They're breaking all agreements. They're behaving very deceptively and show every indication that they are either being controlled by the West or are going to side with the West. And I could not believe it. And, so he said that around beginning of World War III, they're going to announce that there are aliens either here or on their way here. And he said around the beginning or in the first week or two of World War III, they will blow up a city or two, or it will be presented that they've destroyed a couple of cities. And World War III will end because the entire planet will unite against the naughty aliens. And we will unite under a new world order of global government. So he's sort of basically saying that the plan to usher in a one world government that was written down a decade or two ago involves telling the planet that we found an Earth-like planet with a civilization of aliens on it, and minor rearrangement of logistics. Oh, yeah, the Taliban are going to be on our side. This country's going to be on that side. We're going to have a fake World War III for a couple of weeks, and then we're going to bring on the fake alien invasion. So that's what this geopolitical whistleblower is saying. So it's a case of watch this space, because by the time this episode's gone out there, we are getting into that time frame where these events are expected to happen soon or sooner.
Yeah. Well, the problem, I guess, here is you have to wonder whether or not these forecasts are from the divine source or from a dark negative source, because I don't know, it doesn't...
look, I'm with you.
I'm very skeptical.
Yeah. We can do a whole episode on this, because I know several people in real life who get information from what they call the voice. And if I say, who's the voice? They say, well, it's God, without God being fully present, and going, making me faint from his presence, etc. And, they are told information, and you see it, you see validation of the information being correct on little scales and big scales. But then when I look at a couple of people I know, and I look at the Christian guy and the guy in Millennium, sort of thinking, they actually believe in a lot of opposite things. And yet this, I believe this is what this guy experienced, and I believe this is what this guy experienced. And it's something I guess I've had to decide a long time ago in my life. How much do you believe what someone experiences? Mm-hmm. So when someone comes to me and says, this is what I experienced, I give them the benefit of the doubt all the way through. But there are some people out there who have experiences and are given information, and all I can say is it's their higher connection to God giving them that perspective, which is why you get different perspectives. And, at the end of the day, we're all part of the Creator. We're all from the Creator, even the so-called bad guys. And
all part of
in some ways, if it wasn't for the so-called bad guys, we wouldn't have so much spiritual growth, spiritual evolution and learning. We wouldn't be able to overcome negativity, which is something that souls appear to have chosen to do when they've incarnated on Earth. We get to build up an immunity to this thing called negativity. And it seems to be a very desirable lesson to learn for a lot of souls. And Earth seems to be the place to be at the moment if you want to figure out what negativity is and how to overcome it. So I'm guessing some souls probably put their hand up and say, okay, I want to incarnate and be a dictator or a real bastard, because it's going to cause lots of growth for other people. I don't know how it works, but that's...
Well, there you are. Well, I'll share this with you. I have had a voice come to me on several occasions. Very strong.
It's worked out. Accurate too.
It has worked out perfectly because it was a guidance for me. I followed the voice. In fact, I had a voice when I was lying in bed in a hotel one day, and the voice came to me and said, you must do this. I thought, holy hell, what was that? I did. I followed it, and it worked out absolutely perfectly. And that's several times. But that is I've written about it in a book I'm just completing at the moment. But there's so many things that you have to wonder about that you cannot just across the board.
Let me give you one more example of the weirdness of this. My uncle is a very eccentric British upper middle class guy, but he hangs around. He's had lunch with the Queen, and he's been based or doing a lot of work in the Middle East, in Oman, for a few decades. he told me a story about how he was having lunch with the wife of the former British ambassador to Oman. And this was a decade or two ago, and the wife was old, and the former British ambassador had now died. And she was telling my uncle a story that not many people know, and it was about how Oman discovered oil. And this British guy posted to Oman kept getting a voice, and then an angel, and he's not even Christian, and an angel sort of appeared to him in the dreams and says, "Okay, go to this place here and dig, because you're going to find oil for this country." And so he did. He couldn't find it, and the angel visited him multiple times, insisting that he go to a specific place and dig. And this was over multiple months. And finally, when he did do exactly what the angel said, they discovered oil, and Oman has been an oil-rich nation ever since.
Ever since, yeah.
So what the hell would an angel be sent by God to, help establish our fossil fuel industry? I mean, that was the purpose of that angel. I mean,
That's
there
right.
you go. And I mean, I've lost count. I could write a book on what people have been told by angels, and they've come to me and said, I'm doing this in my life because a voice out of nowhere said, do this, and if you don't do this, this is going to happen. And it started to happen, so I did this, and this has changed, and now can you tell the world my story? And, I've lost count of how many times that sort of happened. And so there's no consistent source. If God's sending angels to show us where to find oil or how to make a better telescope or whatever, then I'm back to square one.
I've been working with angels for years, and it works, let me tell you. All right, let's move on. I have to wait for my book. Let's talk about some other things. I mean, things coming from somewhere else. There's a wonderful story about crop circles, because they almost disappeared last year, but they're back to a certain extent. But you have to wonder what the future of crop circles are, because this time they didn't start in Britain. They had dreadful weather there, and the crop circles actually started in France.
Look, it's one of those things. Every year Nexus does an article in the 6th edition of the year, summarising the crop formations that have occurred. And as you say, sometimes they appear in Europe more than England. Sometimes there's more English ones than European. Sometimes there's very few formations at all in a season, and then another year will come along and there'll be incredibly specific ones. Some years a formation will appear one night. People will go, ooh, and look at it and verify that it's impossible that anyone was physically there. And then they'll come back the next day, and the following night, whoever made the crop circle has touched it up and done another addition to it.
That's right.
And sometimes this has happened 3 or 4 consecutive nights. Other times formations have been made that when you look at them from a certain angle, they are 3-dimensional. I have lost track of the number of scientists. And I'm not talking amateur. I'm talking CSIRO, ex-tenured scientists of considerable repute, who spend a lot of time analysing and looking at the formations, because they see in them elements of certain types of circuitry in advanced equipment. Others see patterns that occur in quantum physics and in the linear accelerators. So some of the formations that are appearing are spotted by scientists in classified areas, and they go, that shouldn't be on a field in the middle of Europe. That's a highly classified circuit diagram. What's it doing out there? Yeah. And, of course, we all run around, and some of us go and visit there, and we meditate and think it's aliens, etc. To me, there is great evidence to suggest it's a non-human origin for a lot of the formations. And interestingly, this year, a video resurfaced, black and white, from the early 90s. It was called the Snowflake video back then, because it was the first time anyone had captured on film 3 white balls of light just circling over a field of crops. And as they flew over, the crops just flattened. It was just incredible. It was like, waving a magnet over iron filings. You can make them, stand up or fall down, depending on if the magnet goes. It was just amazing. And at the time, there were a couple of people with fancy Apple computers and said, "Oh, I can do that on the computer in, a couple of hours." And we all said, "Okay, do it and report back to us." No one ever did. And of course, you couldn't do it back then in a couple of hours. You could have done it if you had a couple of weeks and a lot of computer storage space. And so the video was sort of poo-pooed because no one knew what sort of category to put it in. And it surfaced again this year with a lot of people amazed by it. And I think it's resurrected the idea that most of the really intricate formations are not made by humans. There are always some formations made by humans, and you can just visually, it's so apparent.
Oh, yeah, I know. Have you ever stood in a crop circle?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Well, I just don't feel anything about anything. I mean,
I didn't either.
I pick up shungite, I pick up crystals, I hold things. Yeah. People bring sacred stones and say, "Oh, this is nearly knocked over everybody who's picked it up. We want you to hold it." And I'm picking it thinking, "Oh, what am I supposed to do? I can't feel anything. Maybe I should fake a fainting or something." And I sort of think, "Oh, maybe I'm just designed not to feel things because, maybe God gave me a brain to analyze rather than feeling body to feel things." Because if I think the feelings would overwhelm you and you wouldn't have a brain to analyse it. So I don't know. But, yeah, I don't feel anything about anything. I mean,
about anything. Oh, I was just disappointed.
I put it down to me being a Taurus. We're pretty thick and earthy and we need to have instructions punched into us.
That's true. Yeah. Well, my partner Anne's a Taurus, and she and I stood in this crop circle. She didn't feel anything either. But I wondered whether or not this was actually, for a very simple one, whether this was man-made, because some of the other ones, there's no way they could be man-made. No way.
Look, I have had, just so people understand, I have spoken to crop circle skeptics who are absolutely convinced humans are making them, and they've gone out there, a group of 4 people, all to make their own crop circle to show how easy it's done. And, half of the humans have gone out there to fake crop circles that ended up being crop circle believers because of the paranormal experiences they had in the field. And these are people who don't even believe in paranormal experiences.
There you are.
So more than one believer has come from the side of the skeptics. And that you can't even make that claim really with UFOs or ghosts as much, but with crop circles. And then you've got the cases of people go in there, like TV crews have gone in there over the years, especially in the 90s, and every time they get into a formation, every battery that they've got of electrical equipment is drained. The batteries for the camera, the batteries for the mobile phone.
And drones flying over too, they lose their power.
The batteries for, sometimes it's like some of those formations negate all working electricity for periods of time, and then you go in a week later and everything's fine. There is no real rhyme or reason, but there's a lot of mysteries that have not been resolved with the formations. So it's good to have a mystery out there like crop circles, in my opinion.
Certainly is. Well, Duncan, what else would you like to talk about?
Oh man, let me have a look here. Okay, we did a repeat of an article we published some years ago, and it's in memorial to Rex Gilroy, who passed on.
Oh, the dinosaurs, yes.
Yeah, I think Rex passed on last year, and Rex has got to be one of the most eccentric humans I've had to deal with in terms of Nexus information in my life. I could write a book about Rex Gilroy stories, and yes, but I love the guy. He's moved on. He's on the other side. He's probably listening right now, as people are often attracted to humans when we talk about them. But this was in one of his books towards the end of his life and career on strange creatures in Australia, and it's going to surprise a lot of people. But in Australia, a lot of people going back to Aboriginal times have reported seeing dinosaurs still alive, including the one that looks like the Tyrannosaurus, with the big legs and the small hands at the front. And I won't go into the detail because we have mentioned it before, but this especially is been found prevalent in the Gulf country of Queensland. And even in the 90s, there were a couple of Western tourists driving in, off-road, and they see literally a Tyrannosaurus running across the dirt road in front of them, and it's got like a water buffalo in its jaws or a horse in its jaws. Those are big creatures to hold up. And, there's a cave painting up there, apparently, that Rex Gilroy talked about, and it looks like a Tyrannosaurus. And what is interesting about the article, from my point of view, is that since we published that article, and since people have, made a lot more content on YouTube, etc., Australia is not alone in reporting what we would consider extinct animals still apparently running around. Now, whether or not they live underground, above ground, or come out through portals, I don't know. But we're not alone. In the Congo, in Africa, there's several parts of Central Africa where ex-dinosaurs are still being seen, and other creatures, including giant spiders. Would not want to meet one of those. Also, the work of Paul Stonehill. Can't stress enough how amazing his is. Look him up on YouTube, Paul Stonehill. He is the go-to for stuff going on in Russia and Asia and India and China. He has had access to archives and files and research going back decades. And he has done well more than one video episode on how Russian troops stationed on the farthest reaches of their empire, they still have forts and things around the empire. So some of the Russian troops stationed in some of the remote outposts regularly saw what we would call dinosaurs, including the herbivores as well as some of the meat eaters. One new guy posted to the thing, emptied a whole belt of machine gun bullets because he was so alarmed at how close some dinosaurs were to the perimeter of their base. And so he basically panicked and fired off half of the belt of machine gun bullets in the general direction. And they said, what's going on? What's going on? And he talked about the dinosaurs, and the half the soldiers basically knew what he was talking about, and some of the others pretended. But even then, in this part of Russia, the information wasn't sent back to headquarters. It was like, well, don't talk about it. You want to keep your job. You don't want to go to a psych hospital. In Soviet Russia, they were more likely to put you in a mental jail than to investigate your stuff. And so I think a lot of this was not investigated. But obviously reports did make it back through and made it into the archives because people like Paul Stonehill could get access to it and broadcast it. So, yeah, the ancient dinosaurs that you think might have been extinct, there's a lot of very rugged and remote places on this planet, and they could still be there.
Well, that is a wonderful way to finish up our chat for this program. Leave it with the dinosaurs there. Wouldn't you love to even see one? I'd like to fly over one in a helicopter or something, but I don't want to be down there. We see this big bugger coming at you with a water buffalo in his mouth.
I'd like to think that the dinosaurs were more intelligent than what we think, because we look at primitive animals and we think, primitive mentality. But I think those Jurassic Park movies, which showed or portrayed some of the dinosaurs as being a lot more cunning and savvy, I think that's probably closer to the reality. I think they were a top-tier life form for that period of time, and I think they had a lot of intelligence to go with it.
Duncan, great to talk to you once again.
A pleasure as always, and thank you to all the people out there who read and support the magazine. Love you all. Thank you.
And thanks to Duncan Rhodes, editor and publisher of Nexus magazine. And that's it for this week on Radio Out There.